Anyway, welcome. Good to see a lot of old faces, some new faces. This is the dead of summer right now. It's July, and yes, as I said before, stay dry because it'll only get wetter. With that, we're continuing in the book of Exodus, and so we're on chapter 7. And so to just kind of kick us off today, the question I want to ask you guys is, why do many choose to deny God? If you guys know it, look at the title, it's Denial. So why do many choose to deny God? Right? I want you to think about that. It's often a choice, right? People often make that choice of, you know what, I'm not going to believe in God, I'm going to believe in something else. And so I want you to think about what are some of the causes for that as we go into the scripture today. Cool. Exodus 7, open your Bibles, smartphones, look at the screen. Exodus 7, starting with verse 1, where the Lord says this. Then the Lord said to Moses, "See, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and my mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people, the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it." Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord commanded them. Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron 83, when they spoke to Pharaoh. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "When Pharaoh says to you, 'Perform a miracle,' then say to Aaron, 'Take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake.'" So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. Pharaoh then summoned wise men and sorcerers, and the Egyptian magicians also did the same things by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a snake. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart became hard, and he would not listen to them just as the Lord had said. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh's heart is unyielding. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes out to the river. Confront him on the bank of the Nile, and take in your hand the staff that was changed into a snake. Then say to him, 'The Lord your God of the Hebrews has sent me to say to you, let my people go, so that they may worship me in the wilderness. But until now you have not listened.' This is what the Lord says. By this you will know that I am the Lord. With the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water of the Nile, and it will be changed into blood. The fish in the Nile will die, and the river will stink. The Egyptians will not be able to drink its water." The Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams and canals, over the ponds and all the reservoirs, and they will turn to blood. Blood will be everywhere in Egypt, even in the vessels of stone, of wood and stone." Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. He raised his staff in the presence of Pharaoh and his officials and struck the water of the Nile, and all the water was changed into blood. The fish in the Nile died, and the river smelled so bad that the Egyptians could not drink its water. Blood was everywhere in Egypt. But the Egyptian magicians did the same things by their secret arts, and Pharaoh's heart became hard. He would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said. Instead, he turned and went into his palace and did not even take this to heart. And all the Egyptians dug along the Nile to get drinking water, because they could not drink the water of the river. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. Amen. Interesting story. A lot of stuff going on. To remind you of what our theme for the year is, our theme is the gospel of freedom. We went through the gospel part first. We're in the book of Exodus, and we are proclaiming that this is a year where we will experience greater freedom over whatever oppressions or difficulties we may be facing in our lives. Now, we've been going through the book of Exodus, and we've been seeing how God has provided for the Israelites even in this difficult season in Egypt. And he has shown himself, and he's made it clear that he's going to be the hero of the story. We are introduced to this man Moses, who seems like he is primed to do something amazing. He's born as a prince, and he has privilege, he has status, and he utterly fails. And God shows himself, and God reveals himself to Moses in this burning bush, revealing his own personal name as the great I am, Yahweh, Jehovah. But Moses, at this point, is 80 years old. Right? He had 40 years where he thought he was going to save Israel, and 40 years where he just reflected on being a failure. And now as an 80-year-old man, he doubts everything God is telling him. Even though God continues to give him these promises, even though God gives him these supernatural abilities, these gifts, he still denies it. He says, you know what, God, send somebody else. But God shows him that he will do this, and it will be him using Moses. And he sees instead that the Israelites respond in favor and they worship God rather than doubting him initially. But then the work gets harder. Bricks without straw, right? All of a sudden a difficult season becomes even more difficult, and all of a sudden Pharaoh is setting himself as the anti-God toward God, saying, you know what? I will not let the Israelites go and serve and worship their God. They must serve and worship me. And so last week we saw, we saw God continually repeat to Moses. Moses is doubting God once more, and God tells him, I am the Lord. I am the Lord. I will do this because I am the Lord. He repeated it 6 times throughout this entire conversation. And I will make myself known. And that's where we're at right now. Is he has proclaimed this, and as we go into this passage, Moses. This is how the last chapter ended, right? Moses, for the second time, says, and I added some emoticons to just make it more relevant in what this would have looked like if Moses was, I don't know, talking or messaging God. But he's saying for the second time, how can I speak with faltering lips? Right? Why would Pharaoh listen to me? And so he's doubting himself once more. He's doubting his ability, saying, God, why are you sending me? And God says, you know what? I will do this with my mighty hand, and I will do this with signs and wonders. There will be supernatural acts that are going to happen that will make this, and I will do this through my own mighty hand. You just sit back and watch. And so what he proclaims in verse 5 is, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. Remember, Pharaoh challenged Moses by saying, I don't know the Lord. And now God is saying, all the Egyptians will know me after this. They will all know me because of what I will do and how I will bring my people out of Egypt. So this is all setting up the stage, right? Up until this point, all we've seen is like doom and gloom, and now God is like, okay, it's my turn. And so he's rolling up his sleeves, and this is where it starts. And so this is kind of known as the 10 plagues of Israel. And I put this in a question mark because some people will first say, is it really 10? Because they will say, when Moses first goes and they throw down the staff and that becomes a snake, is that not one of those signs and wonders? So most people say this is maybe 11, not 10. The other issue people have is if you look at the passages, it doesn't always call it a plague. Oftentimes they use the word sign and wonder. And so it's not necessarily always identified as plagues, but historically what people call this is the 10 plagues. Right? Now for those of you that grew up in Sunday school, you probably studied this, right? You probably memorized the different plagues. Kind of morbid, honestly. Like kids knowing like all these like horrible things that happen. I don't know. If not, you probably watch like Prince of Egypt and stuff like that. And so you've seen this on screen. And so these are the 10 plagues, right? And we're going through technically the first one because we're going to go into the water becoming blood. But before we get into that, one thing I want you to know, with every single action, it always starts with the Lord said. It's not like Moses is like, okay, all right, God, let's do this. It always starts with the Lord. So every single thing that's going to happen from this point on, God is the initiator. God is the one who is making it happen, and He is the one who is choosing what is going to happen. It all starts with the Lord said. So throw it on the ground. I got this very realistic image of the staff becoming a serpent. And so this is something that we already talked about before, because Moses used this to help convince the Israelites, right? But now he's being asked to do this through Aaron. Remember, this is Aaron and Aaron's staff to do this in front of Pharaoh. So before this was used as a sign to allow Israelites to know that God had listened to them, that he had heard their cry and he was going to respond. And now it's coming down to Pharaoh. This is what we can do. Bam, throw it on the ground. Turns into a snake. Right? You guys watch that movie Snakes on a Plane? It's a ridiculous movie, but anyway. So one other thing to note, why is this important? It's important because snakes represent the power of Pharaoh in Egypt, right? That's why the asp or the cobra. That's the symbol. Like you'll see that on like a lot of the tombs, those golden images of Pharaoh with like a snake coming out of his head. I grew up in the G.I. Joe days, so I would think of like Cobra Commander and stuff like that. Only a couple of you laugh because you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway. This represents Pharaoh's power. And so this is why this is the first act. And so a snake appears. Now, he is challenging the very power of Pharaoh, and so the snake appears. And what happens from there is, Pharaoh hardens his heart. Why? Because he brings, I think I have here, he brings wise men, right? So, and again, I'm polluted by a lot of Western culture, so I think of wise guys. But anyway, those are like gangsters from back in the day. But anyway, so these wise men show up, these conjurers of the magic arts, and they do the same thing that Aaron does. But as the passage tells us, Aaron's staff, Aaron's snake, actually eats up theirs. Right? Pharaoh doesn't notice this. He pays no mind to it. Instead, he chooses to harden his heart and say, "Wait, you know what? This is nothing. My own people can do this. Do something better. You don't have my attention." And so let me take a step back to just explain as we go through these plagues. Now, many people, when they read the Bible, they like to look at things like this and they want to explain it in a way that it could, I guess, happen through natural means, right? So when people say like, "Oh, staff becoming a snake," it wasn't really a staff. You can take a snake and put it into a catatonic snake. You can make it sleep. And then it's like rigid like a staff, and you can use it like a staff and wake it back up. And so people will say that's what happened. Right? They were tricking Pharaoh by making these snakes sleep and then waking them up. And then when we get to the water to the blood, what people like to say is that if the water of the Nile reaches too high, it starts to mix with this red soil and it starts to look like blood. Right? There are a lot of people that like to give these plausible answers, but in many ways by doing so they are denying anything supernatural in the Bible. I've heard similar arguments, and a lot of it has to do with the book of Exodus. Like they'll talk about how the Red Sea, when the Israelites cross the Red Sea, it's actually a mistranslation. It actually should be Reed Sea, and the Reed Sea, the water only comes up to about here. Now, when people do this, they sound really smart. But at the end of the day, they are reading the Bible as if it is guilty before proven innocent. Right? But brothers and sisters, to me, I prefer to read the Bible as innocent, and it's not going to get proven guilty. So it's innocent, right? To me, I want to read the Bible for what it says. And even though I have an engineering background and I'm very analytical, I've come to believe, and I've talked about this before, that the supernatural exists, brothers and sisters. There are things that happen that cannot be explained normally. And the other thing that you can see from this passage, if you read it for what it's saying, these people could do the same thing that Aaron was doing. And as I've said before, just because something is supernatural doesn't mean it's from God. So that's what we're seeing here, is these wise men of Pharaoh are able to do supernatural things, but we can also see is that there are limits to what they can do. God is still more powerful. And we will see this, that through a couple of these different plagues, the wise men will also be able to replicate it, but not to the same extent. And I'll get to that in a second. So here we go. So the first plague, water to blood. Right? The whole river, the whole Nile River turns into blood. The moment Aaron puts his staff down. And it talks about how the water stank so much and that everything in it starts to die, right? You can just imagine this imagery of all of a sudden turns red and then you see like a bunch of fish like pop up, right? Like, you can just see that image, like it's kind of gross, like whoosh. And you see this, you're like, whoa, what's going on? That's what happened. And it even says that it wasn't just the Nile, that there was blood everywhere. It was showing up in like vessels of wood and stone. That means that water that wasn't even in the Nile was turning into blood. And it ends the passage by saying how they're like looking for water that they can drink. They're digging anywhere. They're trying to find a way to sustain themselves. And the passage ends by saying this goes on for 7 days. It's a long time. A long time to be struggling to find water. That's probably the most difficult thing to fast is water, right? Can't live that long without water. And God, He took it away from them in this one act. And so the Nile is important because the Nile, if the Nile doesn't exist, Egypt doesn't exist. Joyce is shaking her head because she lived in Egypt for a year. She says the Nile's dirty. But brothers and sisters, without the Nile, Egypt would just be desert. There would be no life. Right? The Nile itself brings rich soil with which they can grow, vegetation, with which they can feed animals. That has been the way that Egypt ever became a nation, a powerhouse, was because they had a source of life. Not only was it a source of life, it was a source of transportation. Right? They could get things down the Nile very quickly, and so they could move things back and forth. This was the physical source of the power of Egypt, and this is the first thing God attacks. Interestingly enough, and you'll see me refer to this as I continue to go through the plagues, is that many of the things that God is attacking have been personified into gods in Egypt. And so here they have Hapi, I guess, the god of the Nile. But actually what I've heard is, as important as the Nile was to Egyptians, they didn't necessarily spiritualize it that much. Apparently this is the god of flooding. So it was important that the Nile would flood because that would spread more fertile soil. Right? That was very important for them. But this is what is being challenged. This is something that was valuable to the Egyptians, and God attacks it. He says, you know what? I am more powerful than the Nile. I am more powerful than whatever you have that represents the Nile. As we continue, I will refer to other gods, but there are going to be times where it's either multiple gods or one that doesn't clearly connect. But regardless, the main thing that you need to understand that as God is doing these 10 different plagues, is that He is attacking the very livelihood, everything that the Egyptians value. And He's doing it in sort of a negative way. If there's one way to look at this is decreation. God is decreating the things that Egypt values the most. And the reason why is because Pharaoh has challenged him. Pharaoh has said, I don't know the Lord. And so God's like, you will know me, because I will take back everything I've given to you. This is decreation. Now, again, Pharaoh sees this. He sees the water turn into blood, and then he sees his own magicians do the same thing. And he's like, no big deal. And he walks away. Doesn't even pay attention. While the rest of his people are suffering because they don't have water for 7 days. So why is Pharaoh hardening his heart? Why is he choosing not even to pay attention to Moses and Aaron? Now bear in mind, Moses and Aaron are 80 and 83 years old. I don't know if I would listen to some 80 and 83-year-old man walking up to me like, you crazy old man, get away from me. But regardless, he's not listening to them. He's hardening his heart. And so what we see from these two actions is that both use Aaron's staff, both were actually replicated by the wise men of Egypt, and Pharaoh hardened his heart. And all of these came from God. Now we will see the shift. We will see the shift to Moses' staff. We will see the shift to them not being able to replicate. And we will actually see the shift to God hardening Pharaoh's heart. It's kind of interesting. This will all shift as we continue to go along. But this is how it starts. The things that this starts off with, they're attacking the very livelihood of Egypt, but at the end of the day, Pharaoh chooses not to pay attention to it at all. He hardens his heart. Now, interestingly enough, we've been doing Bible study on the Gospel of John. Now, this connection just came to me very quickly because I saw immediately the way you look at the Gospel of John is it's split into two, the book of signs and the book of glory. And in the book of signs, there are arguably 7 to 8 signs where Jesus performs miracles that broadly proclaim that he is the Son of God. And also, not coincidentally, the first sign is water changing to wine. Right? Here in this first act, we have water turning to blood. In Jesus' time, when he shows up, his first act is water to wine. Now, what is the difference here? The difference that we are seeing in the Gospel of John is that when Jesus comes and when he does these miracles and he's healing people and he's raising people from the dead and he starts off with changing water to wine, what we are seeing is the opposite of what we are seeing in Exodus. We are seeing restoration. We are seeing recreation, not decreation. The interesting thing about Jesus is that miracles that he performs is generally about putting things into what the order should have been. When Jesus heals someone who is blind, he is putting that person back to where they should have been. So we're seeing the opposite. That in Exodus, because God has been challenged, he is decreating. But when Jesus comes to reveal himself as the Son of God, the one who intends to save us all, he does so by restoring creation. This is the heart of God. This is the heart of Jesus. To restore, to bring peace. And so what I want to challenge today with is, we are being hit from both sides. Know God and know Jesus. The reason why God is doing these terrible things in the book of Exodus is so that the Egyptians will know who he is. They will forever know who he is. But the reason why Jesus came and the reason why Jesus did these miracles and ultimately died on the cross for us is so that we would know him and we would know that he truly is the Son of God. And he has truly done this for us. So brothers and sisters, know God, know Jesus. Now, here's what I see as the reason why Pharaoh is hardening his heart. He is seeing his wise men, his magicians, do similar things to what God is doing. And what he is saying is, you know what? There is no God. He is accepting counterfeits. He is accepting cheap imitations of what is true power. And he's okay with it. So brothers and sisters, the challenges for us today is, in many times, in many different things that we see, we are going to see things that at many times mimics God. Right? Mimics the things that he can give to us, mimics the things that we want from God, but they're just counterfeits. So what I want to challenge you guys with today is, don't be like Pharaoh. When you see these counterfeits, don't accept them. Don't have a hardened heart toward God, where you're like, you know what, God, you're not providing for me. There are other things I can depend on. There are other things I can reach toward. There are other things that I can ultimately work and serve and worship towards that will give me the things that I want. It's not you. Brothers and sisters, I want you to understand those are all lies. And that whatever these counterfeits are, is they will never reach the depth of what God intends to do for you. So brothers and sisters, don't fall for these counterfeits. Don't fall for things that promise all these blessings to you that ultimately aren't going to amount to anything else. Whether it's, following the God of education, whether it's following a certain career path that we think is going to make all things come true. I think for me, as I was an engineer for 7 years, right? I worked for Motorola, and I think very quickly, like one of the things that happens when you become a professional is going to college. I think going through the educational system in America, it's nice because you know what's next, right? I'm in first grade, I'm going to second grade next year. And you just keep going up that rank, like, I'm graduating high school, I'm going to college now. So you just keep following these, and then you graduate college, you're like, what do I do with my life? Like, oh no, there's no path anymore. Like, I've lived my entire life knowing what is next, and now I have no idea, right? And so you kind of over-glorify your career, where you're like, yeah, I'm going to find a job that fulfills me. It's going to give me everything that I want, right? And it's like, and you kind of put it on this pedestal, and then you actually start working, and you're like, this is lame. I'm not fulfilled. I'm tired. I'm bored. like, this is not what I wanted it to be. And so a lot of times people start working in these careers and ultimately don't find the fulfillment that they were dreaming of. And so what do? They kind of move on to the next thing. Like, okay, I'm going to get married. And then they put this image of this, like, the one, right? Like, he or she is going to fulfill all my dreams. Right? They are going to, you complete me, right? Jerry Maguire, yes. And so like you put these things on a pedestal, then you get married. And you're like, what's wrong with this person? They're more messed up than I am. Why is this so hard, right? I'm gonna have some kids. Like, what's going on? They don't listen to me. And you keep going to this next thing, and the next thing you know, you're like, I'm going to die soon. And so you're chasing this dream and nothing fulfills it, right? Because we're falling for counterfeits. We're all along. God has always been there. And so I'm not saying these are bad things, right? I'm not saying don't get married, don't get a job, like don't have family. Like if you don't do anything, I don't know what you're going to do with your life, like honestly. But at the end of the day, don't make these things counterfeit gods. Don't find your fulfillment through these other things. Find it through God. Know Him. And really seek the peace and restoration that Jesus wants to give you. As we grow in our relationship with Jesus, He will renew, He will restore the things that are broken, the things that have become lost over time. And so as we're seeing this negative image of Exodus slowly being destroyed, or not Exodus, Egypt slowly being destroyed. Joyce mentioned to me that she thinks all these things happen because she's like, Egypt is disgusting.
No.
But regardless, God left His mark there. And at the same time, the opposite is, when we seek Jesus into our lives, He will restore, He will cleanse, He will make whole. So that is our hope. So brothers and sisters, this doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to get fixed. But I really do challenge you guys that as you grow in your walk with Jesus, you will have peace. Even if you're going through the same difficult season in life, in work, whatever it is, you'll be able to do so with peace, the peace of Christ. And I also assure you that He will help you to overcome these things. So brothers and sisters, let's not fall for these counterfeits. Let's not live in denial. Denial. But let us choose, I'm sorry, I gotta be cheesy. Let's instead choose to live under Christ and to know the restoration and peace that He wants to allow us to experience. Let's pray. I want us to take a moment to just pray that, to ask God, what are these counterfeits that I'm falling for? What are these things that I'm pursuing that in reality aren't going to give me the hope, aren't going to give me the fulfillment that I'm seeking for? Let's really just take a moment to see what are the counterfeit gods in our lives and how can we lay them down. Let's take a moment to pray into that. let's pray that as God reveals whatever these counterfeits may be, whatever these distractions may be, let's pray that we would instead choose God, to know Him, to seek out Him, and to make Him our goal, to make Him our purpose. So let's really just pray that we would set these other things aside and choose to know God and Him alone. Let's pray. Father, we just pray, Lord, that whatever counterfeits there might be in our lives, whatever things that are vying for our attention, vying for our devotion, may you reveal, Lord, that instead of peace and joy, these things are actually bringing in more chaos and more corruption into our lives, that they are leading us away from you. So help us instead to choose you, to cling to you, to make you our focus, and to fix our eyes on you, so that you can give us that restoration and peace that you desire us to have. So Jesus, cleanse us anew, wash us, and help us to just keep our eyes fixed on you, that these signs and wonders would always point us towards you, that it's not about these things, Lord. A sign is only, the purpose of a sign is to point back to something else. And Lord, I pray, Lord, that we would always fix our eyes on you, the source. That we would not settle for anything less. So encourage us in that way. And help us to grow. And to live in the truth that only comes through walking in step with you. We thank you, Lord, and we praise you. All in the name of Jesus. Amen.
At this time, let's give our hearts before the Lord as we give Him our offerings. Lord, we seek and yearn for your everlasting love. Lord, we seek and yearn for your everlasting peace. Mighty God, who we give our finances to you, Lord. God, we just pray, Lord, that if there are any idols in our life, if there are any things that are, or any person that is taking the place of where you should be, our King, God, we just pray that it will be removed and that you will sit as our number one, Lord. That we will trust in you, Lord, and that we will look to you alone, Lord. That when we have a choice, we will choose to follow after you, and that we will choose to love you with all that we are and all that we have, Lord. Would you help us, Lord, to love you and to follow you in this way, Lord. We thank you, Lord, and we declare that you are the God of love and that you are the God of peace.